Class.
Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining me for 3 different ways to make bows. So we're going to make this as simple as we possibly can because bow making can be pretty intimidating. So we're going to try and get you some formulas, get you some ideas of how to do the step-by-step so that you can make some beautiful bows. I see some of you might be playing along with me, so if you need me to repeat something or show something again, I'm happy to do that. We have an hour together today to play around, so we'll get through our 3 types of bows, and you just never know, we might be able to throw a couple of extra techniques in there. So I want to show you behind me is a burlap wreath that we made last week. So every Thursday and Friday, I come with new craft classes. So we made this burlap wreath, and part of the burlap wreath was this bow. So I wanted to really take some time and focus just on the bow and give as much different instruction as I can. So if you are taking this class and you didn't take this one, now you're going to learn how to make a bow, and hey, you might as well make a wreath to go with it. So consider going back and watching that on YouTube. And I'm going to show you all the different, I have access to lots of different kinds of ribbons because I work for Michaels. So I'm going to be using lots of different kinds, but the kind that I suggested that you get is something like this one. It's a Celebrate It, it's 2.5 inches, and the most important key element is that it's wired. So a wired ribbon is always going to be easier for making bows than something that doesn't have a wire in it, and I'll show you why in a little bit. But anything wired, 2.5 inches is great. If you also get a 1.5 inch, something a little bit thinner, you can use that too. So the 2 that I suggested for class today, I really think are best for beginners because both sides of the ribbon look exactly the same. You might get into some ribbon when we get into some of the holiday seasons like Christmas or Halloween, where this ribbon is what we call directional because it matters which way you put it. And one side is a bad side and one side is a good side. So if you're brand new to making bows, you definitely want to give yourself a break and find a ribbon that looks the same on both sides and that has some wire, because those are going to be 2 things that are going to be really helpful to you, especially if you're a beginner. We can work with other ribbons and I can show you how to do that, but those are going to be the best for beginners. So let's go ahead and flip over to the other camera, and I'm going to show you some of these different bows that we're going to be talking about today. This is the first kind that I'm going to show you, this cute little kind of like a cheetah leopardy sort of pattern. But you can do it with any of the different bows. This is a 1.5 inch ribbon, so you see that it's a little bit thinner than the other ones. And this is what we call a flat bow. So it's something that could look really nice on a picture frame or something like on a present, something that's going to be flat because it is relatively flat. Just a sweet little simple bow to make. I hope that you're going to be able to catch on to this one really quickly, and you can make these with all sorts of things. You can picture putting this on a barrette or something too and having some cute little hair accessories, or putting it on a little headband and having like a cute bow for a baby or something like that too. So these are really awesome, and I'm going to show you this one. And then these other kind of bows are going to be more of what we call pom-pom bows. So pom-pom bows are kind of just like, they have all these loops, and you can make the loops so that they kind of lay in a stack like this one, or you can make the loops that are kind of similar in size and shape to make a big poof. So these are what we call these pom-pom bows, and I'm going to show you 2 different methods of making these, depending on kind of where you're at with, if you've ever done this before. So speaking of that, if you are with me live right now and you'd like to tell me in the chat if you have ever made a bow before, give me an idea if you're a brand new beginner or if you're somewhere in the middle of you've tried it, but you're not really quite sure what you're doing, let me know. So I'm going to have at least two different bolts of ribbon. I'm going to have we got some newbies. So I'm going to have a 2.5 and I'm going to have a 1.5. I'm also going to have some kind of ruler. I have a fancy Cricut one right here, but if you have any kind of 12-inch ruler or anything like that, you're good to go. I'm going to have either some pipe cleaners or some wire, some paddle wire, or both, depending. Sometimes for people who are just starting, and it seems like a lot of you are pretty much new, you're going to want to use something a little bit bigger like the pipe cleaner because it's going to be easier for you to wrap your fingers around. If you're a little bit more advanced, you might want to use a thinner wire so that you can hide it a lot better. So consider that. You can also use things like twist ties. So anything that has some good wire in it that you're going to be able to twist something and make something really tight is going to be helpful. And of course, scissors. So keep that in mind that that's what you'll need for today. I'm going to start with my 1.5 inch, but you can do the same technique I'm about to show you with any of your kinds. And we are going to make this flat bow first. So with your flat bow, it's totally fine if you don't have pipe cleaners. Anything you have that's going to have a little bit of wire in it is perfect. So don't worry about that. I'm going to go ahead and start by cutting about 18 inches of my 1.5 inch wired ribbon. It's okay if it's not a perfect 18 inches, but something about that amount would be a good place for us to start. Now, if you got the metallic ribbon that I suggested, then it doesn't matter which way you have your metallic ribbon because you're going to see both sides the exact same. But with the ribbon I'm showing you right now, we have a good side and we have a bad side. So the good side, I'm going to put face down, and I have these two ends of my 18 inches of ribbon. And what's going to happen is I'm going to find the center of my ribbon by folding it in half. And I'm going to put my finger right here at the center. And then to make this cute little sweet bow, all you're going to do is take each one of these ends and cross over that center and cross over that center. And you are already on your way to making this bow. So I'm going to open it back up and show you again. Here's the center. I'm going to take this end and I'm going to cross over that center. It's kind of like the collar of a shirt, if you can imagine that kind of curve to it. Over here, I'm going to take this end and I'm going to cross it over in the center. So you can kind of see this looks like the t-shirt collar or like a collar of a collared shirt. And you're going to scrunch this crossover with the back and let these tails kind of fall where they will. And when you're scrunching, you have these two loops and you have these two cute little tails. Now, if you want your tails to be a little bit longer, then when you cross, you want to have more of this crossed over to be the tail. So see how I left a lot more of the tail this time and made a shorter loop over here. Over here, I'm going to cross a little bit more this time to leave a bigger tail. So I've crossed these. I'm scrunching in the middle, and then I'm going to cut just a little piece of wire. So you can use pipe cleaner, you can use wire. I'm going to go ahead and use pipe cleaner since I can easily show you that a lot better than seeing the teeny tiny wire on the camera. And I'm going to twist this pipe cleaner over this and try and keep it in the center so that I keep both of my sides of my bow even. And this is what I have so far. And right now, in and of itself, it's adorable. And if you use a very thin wire, you can be done right here and you don't have to do anything else, and you have the sweet bow that you can put on something else. We're going to build it up a little bit. We're going to do a little bit of layering. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with a little bit of a larger curve and longer tails. And then I'm going to stack these on top of each other, and I will end up hiding that pipe cleaner by putting a little piece in the center. So I'm going to do this same process again to make this sweet little flat bow. And since I did about 18 inches last time, I think I'm even going to try and double that so that I can make a much larger bow with much larger loops and with much longer tails. So I doubled that 18, 36 inches. And it doesn't have to be exactly 36 inches, but something bigger than your 18 for sure. I'm going to fold this ribbon in half to see where the halfway is so that I can overlap them at the halfway point. I'll put my finger here. And then I have the nice side of my pattern face down. So if you do have a side to your pattern, have it face down. I'm going to take the tail and I'm going to kind of figure out how big do I want this loop to be and how long do I want this tail to be. And I kind of like this. And then I'm going to match that on the other side to have about the same size loop and about the same length tail. And I like to kind of turn these a little bit too, so that the angle of that curve is about the same. So see how if I twist it this way, it looks very different than this one. But if I twist it at that same angle, then both of those loops look nice and similar. So now I'm going to do some scrunching. And I have the other half of my pipe cleaner right here, but you might want to cut wire before you do this part. And I'm going to scrunch in the center. And I'm going to tie this pipe cleaner around it, twist it nice and tight. And what's nice about this is you can undo it if you don't love it yet. And I have uneven tails right now, but I'm going to be able to fix that too. No problem. So you can tuck this sweet bow inside of the other one by taking the leftover pipe cleaner from the first bow. And you can see I'm about to wrap it around the second one to make a nice layer. And if you want to, you could make those loops a little bit closer in, but I kind of like the amount of space that this is taking up. It's very dramatic of a bow. We need some drama on this Friday. Or maybe we don't. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't ask for drama. There we go. So here's a nice, beautiful flat bow. And right now you can still see my pipe cleaner. And right now my tails are a little bit uneven. So first I'm going to go back and I'm going to match up my tails. And I am going to cut on a diagonal. And you can decide which way you want to cut on the diagonal. But I'm going to cut on the diagonal to make these tails the same size. So there I have that cut on the diagonal. And then I'm going to check the other two tails too, and I'm going to match them up. And I don't know if you noticed what I did, but I put the bad side to bad side to line them up because we want the good sides to lay out there nicely. So there we go. And this is what I have so far. And here is the beauty of wired ribbon. You can poof. So go into each one of your loops and you can kind of poof those up as much or as little as you want to give it some volume. And then I am going to hide that pipe cleaner with just a little bit more of this ribbon. So I'm just going to cut probably about 4 or 5 inches of this ribbon. And if you're using the 2.5 inch, if you're using the thicker right now, then you might want to even fold that in half for this part, because we're just going to kind of cover this up by literally going through the center and tying a little knot or just a little tie. If you can tie a knot, but I think honestly that's going to hold and that's going to be okay. And so now I've been able to hide that pipe cleaner by having that center little knot. And this is a really sweet bow that can go on a lot of different things and look really nice. You could add another layer. You can keep going with this exact same technique and make a lot of different layers to fill that in. You can make your tails even longer. You can mix and match. You can have maybe a black and a leopard or something like that. So all of that is up to you. But this is my first type of bow. And so it was a flat bow. And we made it just by folding in half and kind of folding on top of each other to get that center. Squish that center up, wrap it with some ribbon, and you're good to go. So just these two look very different, but it's the same technique. So you can use this technique in lots of different ways. So I'm curious if any of you were working on yours at home, if you were able to get that one. I hope that that one was easy enough for you to follow along with. Let me know if you need me to repeat anything or show anything again. And then we're going to move on to our next one. And because I kind of started you out and hopefully gave you some confidence with this one, the next one we're going to do is going to be the hardest one that we're going to do in this class. So now I have upped the game, and this is going to be the most challenging one. We're going to be doing a pom-pom. And I'm going to show you this pom-pom. And if at any point during this pom-pom process you get frustrated or you get upset with yourself or others, then I'm going to also show you after this one another technique that I call the cut and fluff, which is going to make a very similar style, but I think it's going to be a much easier method to get to the end. So this one is going to be a little bit challenging, so stick with it, see if you can do it. Remember, this video will be available definitely on Monday, so you can always watch it again at your leisure. So if you get frustrated, just let this one go and you can come back to it and study it a little bit later. And then I will teach you this third kind where we're going to do this like cut and fluff kind of situation. Okay, this time I'm using my 2.5-inch ribbon, and I'm using a ribbon that looks the same on both sides. So that's going to make it easier. If you have something that has a design on one side, that's going to be a little bit more challenging, but you can do it. So the idea of this pom-pom bow is to make a bunch of loops, and the loops can be lots of different sizes. And really the idea is just to get a pile of fluff, a pile of loops, a pile of volume, so that you can add to a wreath, you can add to a present, you can put this and hang this on a mantle or anywhere else you might want to hang a bow. So with this one, we are not going to be cutting ribbon. We are going to be kind of gathering the loops with our thumb. And then once we have all the loops, we're going to put them together with our pipe cleaner, and then we'll fluff and fluff and fluff. So I am going to use a pipe cleaner, but if you want to use a thinner wire, that's absolutely okay too. And you're not going to need the wire until the very end. So here we go. What you're going to do is you're going to take the end of your ribbon spool and you're going to make your first loop. And if I were to take a guess, I think that this first loop of mine is about 5 inches. Doesn't have to be perfectly 5 inches, but it's 5 inches. And you might already notice that I scrunched it with my thumb, and I kind of scrunched it together because I don't want to just leave it flat like this. What's going to happen is all the loops are going to get scrunched up right here. So you might as well scrunch them up right now. Now, you're going to make another loop, and you probably want that loop to also be about 5 inches. Now, if you're using ribbon that has one side, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated because you have to decide if your loop needs to go this way or if your loop needs to go this way in order for the pattern to show. But since we're using this kind of double-sided wire, it doesn't really matter as much for us right now. So I'm going to take this fabric and I'm going to fold it towards the center, and I'm going to grab it with this thumb. This thumb is just going to keep grabbing loops over and over and over again. So I scrunched everything in the middle. My loops are about the same size. So now that I have this ribbon, I'm going to kind of make up another loop right here, and I'm going to scrunch it. And then you can either make this loop up here, or you can go on the diagonal and you can make this loop down here. It's really up to you, and both ways are going to work. So if I do it this way, I'm trying to match about that same size loop and scrunching it in the middle. So right now I have about 4 loops. I'm going to do 2 more loops and then I'm going to stop. So I can either go this way or I can go this way with my ribbon. So you can fold it under to make your next loop, or you can fold it over to make your next loop. And because this is double-sided ribbon, we have lots of options. So whatever is easier for you to hold on to. All right, I grabbed it with my thumb. And now this is getting a little tangly, so I'm going to take a second and kind of untangle it while I'm holding all those loops with my thumb. And then I'm going to take this ribbon and I'm going under and scrunching it here with my thumb. And I have 6 loops that are all pretty similar in size. And then I am going to go ahead and cut this ribbon off. And you don't need to cut it perfectly. You just need to cut it off, and we'll tuck that in later. So right now, I'm just scrunching up the middle and really making a place for my wire to come in here and grab all of these loops. So I'm taking a pipe cleaner, but you could also use wire. And as long as that last piece of ribbon was long enough that it's about to get caught in this ribbon or in this pipe cleaner, that's good, because we don't want this one to hang out because obviously it's going to come unraveled. So here I am twisting this pipe cleaner. And this is what I have so far. Don't panic. It's not done, but that's what we have so far. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to make probably about 2 more loops on each side. So probably 4 loops instead of 6 loops this time. And we're going to stack these bows together. So here I go. I'm going to push this off to the side. And this is the exact same technique. So if you missed it the first time, this is a good opportunity for you to see it again. I'm taking the end and I'm folding, And I did guess, and it seems to be that I'm folding about 5-inch long loops. I'm scrunching in the middle. So this extra little bit of ribbon, make sure that you have a little bit of excess over your pinched fingers so that when you put the pipe cleaner, it catches it. Now I'm going to take this side and I'm going to put this loop towards my center finger. So I'm going to fold this up. You can also fold it under, either way works. And I'm going to try and match about the same size. And you're welcome to even fold these towards each other to see if they are the same size. And that's what I have so far. I'm going to make another loop. And this time I'm purposely making this loop just a little bit bigger than the other one. So if I were to guess, I would say that this is probably 5.5 or 6 inches instead of the 5. And then I'm going to make one more that's just a little bit longer, going this direction. And I'm just grabbing this all with my thumb. I'm going to cut this off here because I'm only going to do 4 loops total. And I'm going to take a different pipe cleaner and I'm going to grab these and twist it. So keep in mind that the bow we're making right now, this pom-pom bow, is going to be the most difficult one I'm showing you. So if you're struggling, I think that's pretty normal because this is the most difficult of the 3. Okay. And you can hide that extra tail wherever you want it. And now we have 2 different little stacks that we can use the pipe cleaners to stack on top of each other. So I kind of see that both of my bows are going this way. So I'm going to turn this one on purpose going this way to give me all the direction. And I'm twisting these bundles together in order to make a larger bow. Now, this is what I have so far, and it might be a little meh because we haven't done the best part yet, which is just fluffing it. So the greatest part about a wired ribbon is that it's moldable. So I can literally take this ribbon and I can go into each one of these loops and kind of put my fingers in the loops and spread them out. And they are going to give me these really pretty curls or these really pretty pom-pom kind of shapes. And I can twist them around because it's wired ribbon. So if I want this loop to go this way, it will go that way. If I want it to go this way, it'll go that way. So what's great about this wired ribbon is that you can sculpt it the way you want it. And then this is going to give us our first pom-pom bow. So congratulations if this is the first one you've ever made. And just keep playing with the loops until you like it. Now, if you're doing something like the wreath I showed you at the very beginning, these pom-pom bows are great, but you might also want to add a tail. So I'm going to cut a tail that is going to be about 40 inches because I want it nice and long. Cutting about 40 inches. And then I'm going to fold this tail in half. And up at the top, I'm going to kind of scrunch this together. So I take the folded in half part. Here's the part that's folded in half. I'm scrunching this together right here. And I'm going to go to the back of my bow with all these nice pipe cleaners hanging out. And I'm going to twist that tail into these pipe cleaners. And then I'm actually going to leave these pipe cleaners because if I want to attach this to a wreath, then these pipe cleaners can just go into that wreath form and grab onto it. Also, if you're making ribbons for like the aisles at a church or something like this, you just want to make these even longer so that you can also be able to wrap these around like a banister at a house or like the pews in the aisles of a church or something like that. So these can make some really beautiful wedding decorations, as you can imagine. And if you can do it yourself, you're going to save so much money. So I'm just refluffing everything now that I have this nice tail that's nice and dangly. And I'm going to show you some dovetail tips to my tail. So what a dovetail means is that it's that style where it has two ends that are pointy, and I'm just going to cut like a triangle out of here. And you'll see as soon as I do this. So I'm taking both of my tails, and to make sure my tails are the same length, I've put them on top of each other. And then I'm going to fold both of these together in half. One side has your wire and one side does not have the wire and has the fold. When you cut, you want to cut on the diagonal so that you have the long end of your diagonal is going to be the wire part. So the longest part is going to be down here by you. And this is the shortest part up here. And when I open these, this is what we call a dovetail. So on a checkered fabric, it looks kind of weird, but on other fabrics, it looks just fine with those dovetails. But that does look a little strange with a checker, huh? So we have made a beautiful bow that has a lovely tail to it, and the tail can be as long or as short as you want. You can cut these on the diagonal if you don't like those. In fact, I don't think I like these dovetails at all, so I am going to cut these on the diagonal. Oops, instead of folding these in half, I'm just stacking them on top of each other, and I'm going to go at a diagonal. And I bet I'm going to like this much better. Yep, I do. And I can even twist this one more time so that both of my diagonals are going outward. And I like it. And there's our first pom-pom bow. I'm curious to know if you were able to follow along, if anyone was able to do that on their first try, because that's a tough one. That's the hardest one for sure. Now, the next one I'm going to show you is called, well, I call it, I don't know if anybody else calls it, like a cut and fluff, because we're going to make the same style, but I'm going to show you an easier way to do it than how we did it with our thumbs. So this one, I'm going to be using a book or a journal. And I'm going to be wrapping ribbon around a book or a journal. And you can decide how long you want your loops to be. So if I wrap it this way, my loops are probably going to be about this size. If I wrap it this way, they're going to be a little bit bigger than that. So you can kind of decide from there how big you want. And I'm going to take some of this 2.5 inch ribbon again, and I'm going to wrap it. Here we go. So I honestly think this is an easier method for those of you who may have struggled with the last one. And it doesn't really matter to me where you start your ribbon, if you started in the middle of your book or if you started at the bottom of your book or anything like that. That part doesn't matter as long as you have several wrappings of the ribbon. So I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to keep wrapping this ribbon around this book probably about 6 times. Three. Maybe I lied. Maybe I'll only do 5. I don't even know what I'm doing because I lost track. Good times on a Friday. All right, so I have wrapped around several times. I don't know how many times is several, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have about 6 layers in there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off of the spool. There we go. And I have all of these lovely layers on my book that I'm going to slide off of my book. And I'm going to keep them in a nice stack. There we go. Now, with this stack, I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to cut on a diagonal and cut on a diagonal. I don't want you to cut them apart, so I don't want you to cut all the way. I just want you to have an angle up here. So make sure that it's like a snowflake. I don't want you to cut all the way through the center because then it's going to all fall apart. But I want you to cut on a diagonal here. And I'm going to flip this over and cut on a diagonal here. And make sure that you leave enough of this across the top so that you didn't cut them apart. So I cut and cut. I'm going to go to the other end and I'm going to do the same thing, cut and cut, so that there's a flat part in the middle and the sides are diagonally moving towards that center without cutting through the center. So this is what I have so far. I wrapped it around the book. I slid it off of the book. I cut the corners, cut the corners. And then here's where the magic happens. I'm going to go to the center of my stack and I'm going to pull at the center. And the idea is that these pieces that have been cut are all going to come into the center to be like a bow tie. So here is my cut. And now I'm going to split this and I'm going to pull apart the center so that those cuts all line up in the center and make like a giant bow tie. Now you will at some points have some of these little things that might not actually fit. And so we'll just cut those down. So if you have a piece that doesn't go into your bundle that's a little bit too long, cut it down a little bit, leave a tail so that you have something to wrap it into. But if you have a piece that's not quite making it all the way around, that's okay. Now at this point, I'm going to take my pipe cleaner again, and I'm going to go to the center of this bow tie that we've made. And I am going to twist this pretty tight. So remember that I was calling this bow the cut and fluff. So we have just cut those little bow tie pieces and put them in the center. And now comes the fluff part. So we have a whole bunch of loops and we have a whole bunch of loops, but the problem is that they're all stacked on top of each other. So we are going to pull these loops out. And what's nice is you pull the loop all the way out. And because we cut that center part down, they're going to have some flexibility to kind of move around where we want them to move around. So you're going to unveil all of your loops. And you can kind of move them around. You can move them up and down. You're just peeling each one of these loops out of the pile and kind of going to that center piece and making sure they have room to wiggle. There we go. And we are doing the exact same style of pom-pom bow, but just in a very different way that might be easier for some people. So this loop didn't make it all the way back to the pipe cleaner, so I'm going to cut it down. And we have more than enough loops, so we are fine to cut that one. Going to the other side, and I am on the fluff part of my cut and fluff. There we go. So there's a great question in the chat that asks, how would you layer different ribbons? So I have a couple different ways that I would do it. One way would be like what we were doing before, where I would make a small piece like this, or maybe less wraps and make it a little bit less full. And then I would wrap around the book maybe on the longer side. So maybe one side on the short side and one side on the long side of the book. And then because you have these nice pipe cleaners, you just stack those two piles on top of each other. And you're going to be able to have like two different kinds. It can either be the same ribbon or a different ribbon if you want to use a different ribbon. But those cuts in the middle were what are letting us be able to fluff all these ribbons out right now. So this is what I call the cut and fluff. And it makes that same pom-pom bow, but just in a very different way. And then at this point, I would keep working with this to hide this little tail. I'm probably going to pull it around the back and hide it in the twist ties or in the pipe cleaner or in the wire back here so that it doesn't get in the way of my design. And you can decide if you want to add another layer, like we were talking about before, with a different style of ribbon, or if you want to do something where you can also add your tail like we did before too. All right, so someone is asking a great question, which is going to lead me to this next portion. And they are asking, what do you do if it's a one-sided pattern? Duh. Yep, that's where it gets a little trickier. So I could add a tail to this. I'm not going to right now, but you can. And you have another lovely bow to play with. And just keep sculpting it until you like it. And all of these loops will move wherever you want them to move because they are wired. Before I get to the question about the one-sided pattern, I want to answer a different question about wired ribbon versus not wired ribbon. So this right here is a bow that I made using that flat bow technique, but this ribbon is not wired. So you can tell that it's much floppier. It doesn't do what I want it to do. When I go in here and try and floof this up, It's still going to do whatever it wants to do, and it's going to flop around and do whatever it wants to do. Whereas this is a very similar bow, same style, but it has the wire on each side of this. So if I want it to be very poofy, it will be very poofy. If I want it to be very flat, it will be very flat. And that wire makes all the difference. So I do want you to know that when you're looking at your wire, make sure that you look for a wired ribbon when you're looking for your ribbon, because that's really going to help you a lot. Also, if you start getting into bow making, you can start adding in things like tulle or some mesh or some other things. So you can add some extra sparkle by just doing the same thing with a different material, and you can get a very different result. So someone is asking about the One Direction ribbon or directional ribbon. So let me find you some to show you. Something for dramatic effect. I think I'll go to this Christmas Santa ribbon because this is going to be dramatic. So the difference between what I was just doing and something that has a direction ribbon is when I am gathering my loops, I need all of my loops to have the pattern going on the outside. So if I'm doing the pom-pom style that I showed you, the second kind, I would have to make this loop come up. If I made this loop go down, do you see how the pattern wouldn't show anymore? So you have to be strategic in how you do these loops. And then at this point, you might need to twist this around in order to keep having this pattern on the outside. So it's a lot harder. There's a lot more twisting, but you can do that in order to get it. So at this point, I need to really twist this whole ribbon over because the loop is going to have that bad side right here. So it's more challenging, but it's not impossible. Speaking of not impossible, so if you give up and you're not enjoying this yet, and you are not finding this to be very easy to hold with your fingers, there is one more option for you, and that is the bow maker. So the bow maker can really be a godsend for some people, especially if you have any mobility issues that are harder for you to hold things with your thumbs. This might be just the trick. So this is what a bow maker looks like. It has these little extendable wings, and it has some measurements on them. I don't know if you can see that very well, but like I had my ruler sitting out here to kind of do a 5-inch loop and an 8-inch loop and different things like that. It has these measurements on here. So you can extend them out to make a super long one, or you can push this in. And what happens with your bow maker is that it comes with a little bit of wired material. And so it's like a twist tie, it's like a pipe cleaner, it's like a wire, like all the different things we've been using so far. And the way you use this bow maker is that you take this wire and you put it through this way. There's a little notch here, and there's a little notch here. And so I'm going to wrap this wire around this notch and wrap this wire around this notch. And then what the bow maker is doing is the bow maker is basically your thumb. So it's holding on to all the different loops. So if you can't hold on to it, maybe the bow maker can. If you have a directional ribbon like this one, you just have to pay attention to how you're about to put it into the bow maker. So here I go. I'm taking the ribbon and I'm putting the fancy side of the ribbon down. And see how it just grabbed that ribbon for me and smushed it down? So it's doing that exact same thing we were doing, the scrunching. And so that is going to be good for you. So then I'm going to take, and I'm going to be measuring about 5-inch loops. So I'm going to make this first loop, and these measurements on the side of my bow maker are helping. Now, this doesn't work over here because look, if I make a loop right here, this loop's going to be inside out. So I need to twist. So even with the bow maker, you still need to play with the ribbon if you have a directional ribbon. So I twisted that so that the loop I make here is going to have the design on the outside. Now I need to twist this a little bit over here so that I can make a loop. And if you want to make the next loop a little bit smaller, so maybe like a 4-inch this time, and then over here, I'm untwisting this as I go since it's getting twisted up. and making this one a little bit smaller on this side too. And the bow maker is grabbing all of those in the middle. I'm going to make another one. And it's twisting, and that's okay. It's meant to do that. Make another one a little bit smaller. And over here, twist this. And make this other loop a little bit smaller. And that's where I'm going to call this one. There is probably a limit to the number of loops. That was a great question that was in the chat. Whatever it fits, it can hold. But remember that I've done a lot of the stacking bows for you so far, so you can make them and then you can stack them again. So all of that is going to be really good. I think I missed that last. Oh, yay. I'm just checking out the chat, making sure I'm answering everything. Cool. So now that I have this, remember at the very beginning, I put the wire over here and over here. So basically we've made all the stacks on top of the wire. So now all we need to do is take this wire and grab both parts of the wire. And as you pull it out of the bow maker, all this stuff is scrunched in the middle. And you're just going to twist that all together right here. And I'm going to push that towards the back. So I'm going to cut these down because I didn't mean to have tails. I just had some extra pieces that didn't quite fit in. I'm cutting these two pieces down a little bit, and I'll hide those little mini tails towards the back. And then I have a really nice stack of bows or of loops. And so this is adorable already. You can keep going and you can make a couple stacks and you can put them all together to make a very giant pom-pom. Or what's happening right now is starting to look a lot like this kind of style where I like just having, instead of moving all the loops around to make it very poofy, I like this kind of like linear style of just making different size loops and kind of stacking them together. So the method for doing that is very similar to what we've done for the pom-poms, but you're making the loops all different sizes instead of the same size over and over and over again. So I think we're coming close to the end. It seems like some of you have been following along and were able to do this with me, which is awesome. So as a little review, I think a couple of you said that you came in a little late. We're going to try and get this video to you as soon as we can. At the very latest Monday, you'll have it on YouTube so you can watch again. Just go buy as much wired ribbon as you want. So we took a 1.5 inch ribbon and we did kind of a fold in, and that was able to create these nice flat bows. And you can make several different kinds of flat bows using that exact same technique. And I showed you also the difference between a wired and a non-wired ribbon. So a non-wired is still adorable and you can do lots of things with it. You can still do that same technique, but the loops aren't going to go where you want them to go. Whereas with this one, if you want the loops to go in a certain direction, you can, and it's going to be much more moldable for you to do some things with. We stacked those together, and then we also made a nice pom-pom shaped bow. Let me find the one we made together today, where I was collecting all the loops with my thumbs, and then we just kept going, making loops about the same size. We cut some long tails. We put that all together with a pipe cleaner. So now it's ready to go onto a wreath. It's ready to hang on a door. It's ready to hang all different kinds of places. The same kind of pom-pom, but with a different style. We did what I call the cut and fluff. So I wrapped it around a book, and that's how I made all the loops. And then I pulled it off the book, cut the things in the center to be able to actually be able to cut those apart and fluff those. So that was a really good style too. And then if you don't like any of those styles, there's always the bow maker, and the bow maker is going to grab those loops for you. So you don't have to grab them all with your hands. And then you can have some nice bows too. And you can make bows that are going to be more like the pom-poms. I just made this one that has different size loops to kind of show another style. So that's it for today. Felicia, is there any questions you think I might be missing?
Not that I can think of or that I remember seeing.
Awesome. Well, I am so glad that so many of you have joined with us today and we're able to make these bows. When you make a bow, if you have Instagram, I would love for you to put a hashtag Learn with Michaels or to tag us at Learn with Michaels so that I can see what beautiful bows you are making. And if you haven't already made the burlap wreath, now that you know how to make a bow, I think you should go back to YouTube and watch that video so that you can make yourself a burlap wreath. So have a very good weekend, and I hope to see you in a class again soon.